What's cracking, everybody, and welcome to Kraken R&R, and this one's gonna be a little bit different. Why? Well, that's because
we're at the game! Go Kraken!
Now, yes, the Kraken do end up losing 4-2 to their rivals by proximity in the Vancouver Canucks, but honestly, much like the opener against Vegas, that really doesn't feel like the focus of this game. Obviously, it would have been much better to win the home opener, but it was just awesome being at that first game and seeing what this team looked like playing in Seattle for the first time. And don't worry, we will get to the game, but that is where we're going to start, with the experience of this first home game and being in that brand new arena for the first time. Now, first of all, it was pretty much a perfect Seattle fall day in that it was crisp but not overly cold outside and wet but not raining, which was definitely a good thing for us as we got there early to be close to the front of the line to get in the doors at 5 o'clock. And of course, it was also cool to see the Kraken flag flying atop the Space Needle as it loomed over the arena just on the other side of the Seattle Center, which in and of itself did have a whole bunch of booths and Kraken stuff going on as they were making an event of this whole thing outside the arena as well as inside. On the inside, this is a beautiful building. Obviously, it's brand new, so that is somewhat to be expected, but being in it, it was really cool to see all the stuff that they'd added since I had been in there the last time before the, well, I wouldn't say renovation, the full rebuild of the new stadium. For one, again, not that it's a huge surprise, the difference in depth from the old arena as they dug down to put this new one in under the same roof is very obvious. And one of the things that allowed them to add, which was really cool to see and definitely added to the experience in all sorts of different ways, were the different video boards that they had pretty much lining the entire arena at the front of every new deck, as there are definitely distinct multiple levels in the new arena. Aside from that, as far as the main walkways and concourses are concerned, for one, it was pretty weird to be walking in at ground level and already being at the level of the upper deck, which was pretty obvious to see as you walked around, with there being a lot of open areas where it was easy to see from the main concourse into the arena and be able to see most of it as you're just walking by, which was definitely pretty cool, as I think most people are probably used to when you're on the outside of the building. You don't really see much of the inside. And while we're on the subject of walking areas and the outside of the stadium, easily the coolest part of it, at least the outside of the stadium, is that atrium that they have at the south end, which they absolutely filled with all sorts of video boards that, at least for the Kraken game, mostly they had all sorts of like deep ocean water kind of scenes going on to really make it have this underwater feel to it. Of course, with the glass roof as well. This is also the area of the arena where the team store is, which they call the lair, and already, even in spite of us being among the first in the doors at 5 o'clock, by the time we got from the north end to the south end where the team store is, the line was already ridiculously long, as it was out the door, around the corner, then back wrapped around again, and all the way down across from one end of the arena to the other. But even though we didn't wait in that ridiculous line to get inside the team store, we did still get a look inside of it from the top, as it doesn't have a ceiling and you can look right into it from the stairs going up to the second level. Or, I guess, main level, depending on how you look at it. As far as food and drinks are concerned, as we knew going in, there was a pretty good selection. Though I will say, if I do have one complaint about the new arena, it's that things are definitely very expensive on the inside when it comes to food and drinks. More so even than a Seahawks or Mariners game, which is definitely saying something. So, unless you're willing to spend once you're inside the arena, it's probably best to get your eating and drinking out of the way beforehand. As far as where our seats were, they were just below and behind the press boxes in the upper deck, so definitely in the cheap seats. Now, obviously, I couldn't call this channel cheap seats and be sitting next to the glass, so we were back where we could get a better view of the whole ice. When it came time for the pregame show, at least for this game, they kept it relatively simple. There was no ballet on ice or wild, crazy light show projected onto the ice like you might expect from Vegas. Instead, they dedicated most of the time to a video that they put on the two Jumbotrons, which, yes, that's definitely one pretty cool, unique aspect to this arena, is that they do have those two Jumbotrons on either end rather than one in the middle. But as far as the video, it was a couple minutes long of them pretty much talking about the entire process of bringing this first NHL team to Seattle and all of the things that went into making that happen, which I have to say, being in the arena and watching that video, it definitely made me a bit emotional and got pretty close to shedding a couple of tears at just how awesome it was that this was finally happening. And of course, throughout the night, they brought out all sorts of Seattle area celebrities, either onto that kind of announcing hype deck sort of thing that they have at the north end at the top of the upper deck, like Bobby Wagner, DK Metcalf, Macklemore, of course, and Wilson, who sung the national anthem, of course, of Heart, and also pointed out a couple of people on the Jumbotron, like Sue Bird, who they also brought out at the start of the game, and Russell Wilson and Sierra, who were at the game as well. And yes, in case you're wondering, or maybe it didn't translate on TV, it was definitely very loud in there, even before the game got started, and even with all those acoustic tiles that they have lining the roof of the arena in order to deaden some of the sound. The one thing that happened pregame, though, that at least I certainly wasn't expecting at all, is the fact that the Kraken actually retired the number 32 and hung it up in the rafters. Now, is it a little bit weird that they hung a number that a player has never worn? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but honestly, it's a number that has been tied to this organization from the very beginning. Even outside of them being the 32nd team in the league, it is also a number that had a lot of meaning to the organization, as they did get 32,000 depositors in just the first day alone for season tickets, which is definitely something that they hung on to throughout the process, as that came even before they were officially awarded the team. Plus, of course, there's also the convenient fact that 32 degrees is the temperature at which water freezes into ice, which definitely makes some sense for a hockey team. Of course, that is Fahrenheit, in case you're not from the US and are confused by what I just said there. Finally, getting to the game though, in the first period, this was a pretty back and forth game with chances at both ends of the ice for either team and momentum swings pretty much throughout. If there's one team that I have to pick that maybe had the advantage throughout the first period, it would probably be the Canucks. They had a little bit more possession and a few more shots on goal, but ultimately it did seem like a pretty even period as far as the play was concerned. And with the game still 0-0 as the period started to wind down, both teams traded going on the power play, with the Kraken having the second shot at it pretty close to the end of the period. And while they didn't manage to get on the scoreboard, neither team did, as both penalty kills did their job. The Kraken, after their power play, were able to maintain possession of the puck and eventually hold the offensive zone. It took them a little bit to set up a play to finally get a chance on net before the period ends, but they made it count. It's a nice passing play from the Kraken in the offensive zone that touches a number of different sticks before eventually getting to Donskoy, who finds McCann with a little bit of open ice, who, after his last goal, is definitely not a player I mind having the puck in open ice. But he doesn't end up taking the shot this time. Instead, he finds Vince Dunn, who does take the shot and buries it to make it 1-0 Kraken. And that is definitely when things got loud. So loud, in fact, that at the time I wasn't even sure if they'd actually played the goal horn after the goal. Which, for the record, because I know a lot of people were wondering what the goal horn would be, even though I'm pretty sure they basically announced it before they even announced the team name, it is a Washington State fairy horn. And by that, I mean it's actually a real fairy horn, not just the sound of one. They have a retired fairy horn that they play in the stadium when a goal happens, which is pretty cool and much more a part of the city than a lot of goal horns across the league are. Oh, and no, if I couldn't hear a fairy horn going off indoors, I definitely couldn't hear the goal song either, which is Lithium by Nirvana, also very Seattle and fits in perfectly. And again, because of copyrights and all of that, no, I can't play it for you. You'll just have to go and look it up after this video. But getting back to the goal, which comes basically right at the end of the first period, of course, on a night where they retire the number 32, and for a franchise that has the number 32 pretty much all around it, of course, this first goal to open up the scoring of their first home game comes with 3.2 seconds left in the first period. And yes, it would stay 1-0 going into the first intermission. And just in case you've noticed that my voice might sound a little bit different in this video, that has nothing to do with editing. It's definitely a lot more to do with that reaction to at least that first goal, if not pretty much the entire night. As the second period got started, it became clear pretty quick that the Kraken had been able to maintain some of that energy and momentum from that goal at the end of the first, as they really, for the most part, controlled a lot of the play in the second period and created the majority of the chances. Unfortunately, the only chance that would go in during the second period would be 11 minutes in for Vancouver, coming off of a bad pass from Mark Giordano that ends up getting intercepted by Garland, who finds Horvat in the middle of the ice, and he puts it in to tie up the game. And especially for Giordano as the captain of a team playing its first ever home game, that's probably not the best first impression that you would want to be making in front of a new fan base for that first ever home game. Fortunately for him though, he would make up for it not too long into the third period. As the score is still tied 1-1, he would change that as another nice passing play in the offensive zone gets to Gio with open ice, and he puts it in to make it 2-1 Kraken. And sorry, I don't have any fancy, or to be honest, not so fancy reaction video of the second goal. After that first one, I pretty much just put my phone away for the rest of the game, which based on my phone camera work as you've seen so far was probably for the best. Unfortunately, Seattle wouldn't be able to really maintain momentum coming off of that second goal, and it would be the last one that they would score for the night. Even more unfortunately, Vancouver was not done scoring. Now, I will say that it was nice to see that even though they did have a lead in the third period after that goal that Gio scored, and they didn't really maintain momentum throughout much of the rest of the third period, they also didn't go into that turtle mode that frustrated us quite a bit during the Nashville and Columbus games. There was still quite a bit of back and forth, and play was pretty even between the two teams for the remainder of the third period. But eventually, Vancouver does get on the power play from a tripping call on Soucy, and they make short work of this one as it's the first power play goal on either side that does go in, and once again, it's Horvat. This time coming off of a rebound that's one that you might like to see Grubauer handle a little bit better and not kick right out to a Vancouver player, but again, they're on the power play, so it's hard to be too nitpicky on this one. But if you do want to do some nitpicking, when it comes to the third goal that Vancouver scored, you really don't have to try all that hard to find things to complain about on the Kraken side of things for this one. Now, at first, it is a bit of an unfortunate play that leads to what gets this set up in Vancouver's favor, as Schwartz is just trying to keep the puck in the offensive zone by shooting it along the boards. It does, however, hit a Vancouver skate and bounces towards the Kraken end. The problem is that there was not a whole lot of defensive responsibility, as this allows Connor Garland to get on a breakaway, with pretty much only Dunn, who the puck managed to get past in order to get to Garland, and Alexiak a little bit at the end to try to keep him company. But ultimately, this is a pretty free breakaway for Garland and a pretty open shot that he's able to get off. And it does sneak past Grubauer to make it 3-2 Canucks. And for Grubauer, well, this definitely is not an easy save for him to make, and this is definitely not the type of situation that you want to be putting your goaltender in very often. It's still one that if you want to be a star goaltender like he was last season as a Vezina finalist, and if the Kraken want to make a run this season with him in net, it's one that he's going to have to stop much more often than not, but he isn't able to here. The rest of the third period is pretty uneventful. Eventually, Seattle pulls Grubauer with a little bit less than a minute and a half left, and quickly lose possession in the offensive zone, and Vancouver takes that the other way and puts it in the empty net to make it 4-2, which is how it finishes. For Seattle, in 6 games, they are now 1-4-1, but this is basically a 5th in those 6 games 1-point game if you take away the 2 empty netters against New Jersey and now Vancouver. And really, this was probably the best game that they played start to finish, even including the win against Nashville and the overtime game against Columbus. As really, they played better, cleaner, and more competitively than they did for the vast majority of the road trip, especially those back-to-back losses at the end of it. Especially the passing was much cleaner in this game than it had been pretty much throughout the road trip, but really that was something that was standing out as a negative in those last two games, and they were doing much better in this game, especially in transition coming out of the defensive zone going into the offensive. Where in both the New Jersey and Philadelphia game, they were really just not able to transition cleanly out of the defensive zone, passing into the neutral zone, which they were able to do very well in this game. And then as far as getting it into the offensive zone and creating chances there, they were definitely able to do that much better than they did at all during the road trip in this game, with a number of chances that could have, and in some cases probably should have gone in. Especially Nathan Bastian had a couple, one that went off the post in the first period, which that happens, and then another one where he basically had an empty net from a beautiful pass by Appleton from behind the net that he just whiffs on and can't get behind the goaltender. And Appleton also just about got one in himself, as he got one past Demko, but it didn't have very much speed on it after it got through Demko's legs, and he was able to recover, dive backwards, and get the glove on it before it could cross the red line. And to Demko's credit, he looked really good in this game, making a number of what turned out to be game-saving saves throughout the course of the game, but especially in the second and even a couple in the early third period. So as far as the takeaway from this game, ultimately this one was definitely about it just being the home opener and about the fans. And while 32 was the theme of the night early on, it would have been all too perfect for the Kraken to win this one 3-2. That obviously doesn't end up happening, and they do end up falling to an unenviable 1-4-1 record. It's still not time to panic, especially with the Kraken looking very good throughout the course of this game and clearly improving on a number of things that they needed to at the end of that road trip. So there is, I think, hope for this team to continue improving and start getting that record turned around as things go forward. If you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that I would appreciate you using to help support the channel. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this home opener if you were at the game, or if you have any questions about the experience itself if you're trying to get to the game in the future, down in the comments section. With that though, until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, and as always, go Kraken.